had a very interesting day so far, and we've been talking a lot about virtual assets, uh, different products as well, and we are throwing a lot of terms like exchange, custody. The people, in the panelists talking about broker dealers, exchanges, and we're talking a lot about. We had Chairman P. Vara over here as well. None of this ecosystem, we have representatives from the financial sector as well, would work if we don't have the legal backing to it. So what we will try to do is rather quickly, as we've been requested, to give you an overview where we were a few years ago, where we are today, and how we can make whatever we're discussing today and tomorrow a reality in Pakistan through the legal structure involved. Just a very quick background, and an interesting story. Khalique and I got it. We're primarily emerging tech lawyers. We got into virtual asset space because in 2018 there was a state bank circular which completely barred virtual asset activities for banks, and we were engaged for rather notorious matters. So FIA notices going to different virtual asset service providers, VASPs as we call them, and from there on, an entire journey started where Pakistan Crypto Council was formulated under the finance minister himself, but we had Chairman P. Vara now, Bilal bin Saqib here, who helped draft the law. So the Virtual Assets Ordinance, which was passed in July 2025. And you could see very quickly from there on, we have a Virtual Asset Act now. So the legislation is in place where we have the regulator in the form of P. Vara. Just quick numbers, and I think a lot of people have talked about these numbers in crypto adoption, in the number of users that we have in Pakistan. An estimated of 30 to 40 million users in Pakistan, or out of population of 250 million. It's quite significant, and we have an equivalent of 300 billion USD, annual virtual asset linked activity from Pakistani users themselves. So that's the opportunity for the financial players in the market today. And that's why the regulators thought, you know what, we need to regulate this. An interesting question because since a lot of banks are also here, fintechs are here, if your customer is in Karachi, but the platform is based out of Dubai, whose law are they under? Right? Any takes? So if your customer is sitting in Karachi, but your virtual asset provider, right, the platform itself is based outside Pakistan, whose law will they follow?
From having your account in that account in Dubai Bank or having
Exactly. You're yes, but the good thing is that the law itself has explained that, and we'll come to it later on through the slides, because this becomes very important for our financial institutions right now, right? And it becomes very important for VASPs already operating in Pakistan. So who applies for this licensing regime to begin with?
Excuse me. In this
Sure.
case, are you asking if the entity is NOC already here? Without NOC?
Pre-NOC.
Pre-NOC.
Yeah, so how will a VASP take a decision if they need an NOC? We'll come to this though, because the Act actually explains it. So Khalique and I have divided our session into two bits. I'm going to give you a background about the global developments and how Pakistan borrowed wisdom from those developments, and then Khalique will take you through the Pakistani law itself. There are 5 jurisdictions which are considered major, and Japan is a jurisdiction which is, it's treating crypto as a different asset class, a different category itself. But MICA, the the EU regulator itself, is one which is followed by a lot of jurisdictions, including Pakistan as well. MICA rule book, their laws basically apply to 27 states. What it means is that if you apply for a license in one state, you'll automatically get access to all the member states. MAS Singapore, Dubai Vara, I'm going to emphasize a little more because Pakistani regulator P. Vara has been borrowing a lot of wisdom from Vara, because Vara in Dubai was the first standalone regulator in any part of the world, right? And they have a tiered licensing activity, just like PVARA does in our regime. We have Hong Kong, which has tested out stablecoin regime, and in the United States after the Genius and Clarity Act, we saw. I think Dr. Basit was mentioning someone was mentioning a big pump in the price of Bitcoin after that. I'm not sure who it was, but this, yes, Dr. Naveed. But all of this combined basically is what PVARA looked into before legislation and before passing the Virtual Assets Act. We are a little tight on time, so I'm going to go through everything very quickly. In MICA, there's a three-tier asset taxonomy, ARTs, asset reference tokens, e-money tokens, and other crypto assets, a little broader than what VARA has, and we'll get to it. This is very interesting, and in the sense that MICA has put a hard cutoff, which is 1st July 2026. So national, so they've given some room to VAS to actually adopt their own rule book. Singapore as an interesting regime, but I would actually go to VARA because that's where VARA itself in Pakistan is borrowing more wisdom from. This was the first standalone VA regulatory body. This is interesting because this had in Dubai 7 licensable activities, and in our act there is a schedule called Schedule 1. So we have taken a lot of wisdom from VARA and we've listed these categories in our Schedule 1 as well, including these names as you see: advisory, broker dealer, custody, exchange, lending and borrowing, management investment, and issuance as we have it in PVARA law. Why I mention this is because all the financial institutions and all the FIs, fintechs in Pakistan who are looking to monetize on this opportunity need to decide which licensing category they will fall in. Every licensing category, as Khalique will tell you later on, has its own requirements. So we need to be aware while developing products as to what the legal requirements are going to be. But Khalique will run you more into it. Right. This I think we can skip for now. Right. So the FATF and travel rule, I'd like to get into a little bit more detail to give some context into why Pakistan thought it was necessary to regularize virtual asset space. $300 billion virtual asset activity happening per annum is a huge amount. Pakistan has a P2P network, still very actively used in Pakistan today. FATF gave us Pakistan a hard deadline in order to implement they have a regulation 16, I believe, which they said that they have to, countries need to adopt to it, right? So Pakistan was uh, rightly so, but it was forced to get into legislation very quickly. Hence, we saw everything happening in a very short span of time. Certain numbers which we will go through today and tomorrow would be related to the travel rule itself. So suspicious transaction activity, etc., which means that there will be certain reporting requirements by licensed activities, and these reporting activities would depend upon a certain threshold of amount which that activity would be related to, which every VASP will have to report to our regulator, which is the PVARA. All right. So if you see these, so the reason why I mentioned VARA in Dubai and EU MICA was because this entire regime is built on 5 pillars, so to speak, right? So as Khalique and I would like to call them. There's an activity-based licensing, and there's a certain categories which are listed very clearly in our schedule. Every licensing activity has its own capital requirements, so as we call it, paid up capital requirements. And every VASP, so every virtual asset activity needs to follow the travel rule itself, and FATF regulations. So generally, you will need to have compliant AML, CFT policies, and you'll have to make sure that you as a VASP are actually following them, and you have systems in place. That's the real job of the regulator, and it's ensuring that we go for it. In the later part of our slides, Khalique will tell you that one of the prerequisites in Pakistan is for every VASP to be listed on what we call a Go AML portal in order to report any suspicious activity. There's consumer protection as with any other regulator in the world. Um, and then obviously we talk about enforcement of any regulator, including PVARA. So very quickly we're in a phase where PVARA has just started issuing NOCs, as Bilal over here was also telling us in the morning that they are hiring staff right now and they're building more regulations. And the enforcement part will start relatively quickly when a regulator has more staff. So, Khalique, over to you.
Now's the bit where I feel like all of you would be more sort of interested in coming to Pakistan's framework. As Mohtashim mentioned, it's an 8-year journey, and it all started with the State Bank notification of 2018, where there was a blanket ban on all the banks. However, this ban was not sort of implemented on the public generally. What happened was that peer-to-peer persisted. Peer-to-peer meaning thereby, if I paid someone else, they deposited into my crypto wallet and trading was happening. And that's why we reached the figure of 300 billion volume and 40 million accounts. So something had to be done with it. And as Mohtashim mentioned, that there was FATF compliance. Please, sir.
आप क्या करने वाला आप? By the end of the presentation, we'll figure out all the questions.
Sorry, go on.
So regarding this BPRD circular, this is the notorious 4 or 5 line circular. If you read it, it clearly says that the financial institutions are prohibited from facilitating the transactions in all its forms. So as long as you're not touching the banking network, you're okay.
That's what us lawyers figured out and advised. But yeah, so what happened was that this was a gray area.
So the reason I'm asking this question, if it's a private transaction between two people, you give me this crypto and I give you this whatever, it's a private transaction between two individuals. I'm not touching the bank.
The FIA was only penalizing those people who were involved in some illicit activity or linked to exchanges. They weren't targeting people who were generally trading. They were, again, if 40 million are trading, how many did FIA get to? Like 10, 20 or 100? So 40 million is a huge number. So let's keep questions in an organized manner, otherwise, let's please.
So that means the crypto as such was not banned.
Yep.
Crypto was not banned. It's just that you couldn't touch the financial network.
Yep.
Which is what the State Bank was trying to protect, and it kind of makes sense.
Basically, you are not allowed to use the credit card to purchase tokens from outside Pakistan.
So it was a grey market, not a blanket ban. So, we've been advised by the organizers to take the questions afterwards. By the way, we are here tomorrow as well for 1 complete hour, hopefully, and we will definitely take up all your questions.
This discussion was more enjoyment and fun because everybody was interacting together.
We can have that over a cup of coffee. So then,
You guys will not trust us with time the next time they come tomorrow. So I think we better, start and finish in time.
so what happened was that Pakistan was put by FATF in the grey list. And they told us that, either you ban it or you regulate it. And luckily enough, we went through the route where a lot of other countries are going towards, which is regulating. And then in March 2025, Pakistan Crypto Council was formed. As Mohtashim sort of went through the timeline, I'd like to add a few things. Ordinance was temporary in nature. An ordinance does not become a permanent thing. It had to be made an act. It was made an act in March 2026. And now we also have the NOC regulations, due to which 2 of the global VASPs have been given an NOC, which is one is Binance, the other one is HTX. Now what we're waiting for are detailed regulations, and we're expecting that PVARA will issue the same. We heard yesterday there was a meeting and the Prime Minister also pushed for the same. And there's another thing, which is the State Bank circular, which was reversed, and now PVARA sandbox is also open for ARTs, which is again to encourage promotion, as a lot of discussion today has been based on fiat reference tokens and ARTs. So the regulators seems to be pushing the agenda where ARTs will be promoted. So the architecture in numbers, there are a total of 74 sections, there are 12 chapters, and there are 10 categories. I feel like this is the most important number. So 10 categories means that what type of virtual asset services the regulator is going to regulate. It's a bit different from VARA. VARA just goes ahead with 7 categories. We've included a couple new. One of which is very important, which is mining. In the original ordinance, we did not have mining. Now we also have mining, and also there's a strategic wallet reserve, which the government has included within the virtual asset activity. So these are the 10. Advisory services, broker-dealer services, custody and administration services. I feel like 2 and 3 and 4 are the most important. So your wallet will fall under 3, and there could be an overlap of 2 as well. But generally, when we talk about global exchanges, they will need 1 license, and there could be an overlap of other licenses. Just to give an example, if you're a licensed exchange, you would have ancillary custody, because without having that, you cannot operate like an exchange. So there would be certain overlaps. Similarly, lending and borrowing services, it depends what trajectory the regulator sort of takes, but what we've seen in global regulators, there can be an overlap, and they can be multi-licensing, like 3-4 tiered categories fixed into one. But as you would say, the parent category would always be exchange services, under which there would be multiple categories that can fall under. But one more important thing is that if, for example, you go ahead with a fiat reference token, a lot of these exchanges have launched their own tokens. To give you an example, Binance is an exchange, but they also have a BNB token. They would definitely need a separate license. Reason why? Because segregation of assets is very important. You cannot do it under one tier. You cannot be an exchange or broker dealer and also a fiat reference token issuer under the same category. So there will need to be segregation of assets. So so there was a question that was posed earlier on, which was, if you're based out of Dubai and you're based out of Pakistan, but the global VASP, their NOC is in Dubai, where do you fall under? So if, for example, a Pakistani incorporated entity is serving any client, whether they're in or out, I feel like there's a straightforward answer to it. They're going to be in. However, if a foreign entity targets Pakistani resident users, what do you think? Will they be considered in or out of Pakistan? Just quickly. They'll be in. Foreign entity actively marketing into Pakistan, again, they're operating in Pakistan. Foreign entity using Pakistan-based infrastructure or service providers, so their partners, on-off-ramp partners are Pakistani, they'll also be considered Pakistani, operating from Pakistan. Foreign entity onboarding via Pakistan identity documents, again, so for example, like the global VASP who allow Pakistani residents to open their accounts, but there's some who do not. So if they allow, then they are operating in from Pakistan. So there's a concept of reverse solicitation, which would obviously sort of, provide a narrow window, but it's not actually sort of, particularly very safe. A Pakistani resident user reaches an offshore platform on their own initiative. So people can use mechanisms like VPN, for example. If they do so, will you be considered operating in Pakistan or out of Pakistan? Or they use some other ID document. So there are a lot of people who have dual nationalities. How would that be considered? So this is something, again, is not quite clear. Similarly, there are a lot of VASPs who do not really want your ID documents, although KYC is required that you do provide those, but certain VASPs do not need that. They just need an email address and mobile number. And if you somehow get a foreign mobile number and email obviously is not traceable, then they do allow. And a lot of these exchanges have been sort of, under the watch of global regulators like VARA, MICA, and you see every now and then there's a crackdown on them because they do not have the requisite KYC checks. So if there's no marketing into Pakistan, there's no Pakistan-facing onboarding flow, but still somehow people have access to it through their partners. How would that sort of work out? Even in this scenario, you're operating in or out of Pakistan. So the regulator in the definition, which is subsection 2, has clearly defined in and out of Pakistan. What if your business operations or staff is not in Pakistan? but somehow you're reaching out to clients here. The regulator will say, because the clients, the customers are in Pakistan, you will be here. It does not matter where you're being operated from. And again, a lot of these global VASPs do not have any presence, and they do not have any presence in multiple jurisdictions they're operating from. This technology is global, where it's decentralized, it's available to any and everyone, so you do not need business operations person. It's not like a bank where you need to go and deposit money or withdraw funds. It's all done on chain. So these sort of things will be a fact-specific defense, but it's not a safe harbor, because as I mentioned, there are exceptions within this. So if you can all say oh, we have these 4 categories, but still it's not a safe harbor, because the regulator can still say you're reaching out to Pakistani customers one way or the other. So strategic risk would obviously be that PWARA, which has enforcement obligations under the law, they can penalize. So the Act generally, has given an NOC regulation sort of came up, which authorized already existing VASs to operate out of Pakistan. It did not allow new entities within Pakistan. It was for already existing VASPs. And in this one, it was quite a strenuous requirement. When you look at those obligations, it's not for any new business to actually fulfill, where you need different set of policies. You need at least 13 policies. You need to fill out 8 forms. It clearly meant that the regulator is encouraging already existing VAS to come in, because it's still a nascent market, rather than directly going for newer VASPs. I feel as was mentioned in the talk in the morning, once the regulations will come, the regulator will be more open to the idea where fresh applications will be sort of entertained from local or even foreign VASP. But these NOC regulations were strictly for foreign VASP, and that is sort of seconded with the fact that Binance, which is an existing VASP with multiple licenses, HTX, again existing VASP with multiple licenses, were granted NOCs. And an important thing to note here is that the NOC is not a blanket for them to use, to do on-off ramp or start working in the market. It was just a precondition that they can fulfill next or other codal formalities. For example, they need to register with the GoAML portal. Once they register with the GoAML portal, they need to then incorporate an entity in Pakistan, a local entity, and then they need to apply for a full-fledged license. They can only operate in Pakistan once they have a full-fledged license. An NOC is a buffer. And why was this buffer needed? Was because there were already 40 million people who were on the chain, who are on these platforms. So what to do with them? You cannot tell these VAS to switch off the button to offboard them, because so much money is involved. So they had to give this sort of a grace period of sorts, where they would have allowed these VASs to operate not indefinitely, just for a small period of time under an NOC regime. And now we'll see, within the next few months, we're hoping that we'll see more regulations and more licensing being rolled out, where then you can only invest in fully licensed VASPs, which I feel, as of today, even is still a bit gray, because obviously Binance does have an NOC, but there are other VASs operating out of Pakistan who do not. But people do invest in them. But I feel 6 months, a year down the line, or maybe 18 months down the line, then the enforcement part, the last part of the act, will take into effect, and they will actually encourage you to invest in licensed VASPs and thoroughly discourage from investing or putting in your money in unlicensed VASPs. Another important element is the on-off ramp part. This is a very critical part. Right now, even with the NOC, any money that is being deposited is done through peer-to-peer. There is no element where there are many banks sitting here. No bank still allows, even after the circular, I presume, for the users to put in money in an exchange. That has still to be done. I think so. The banks might be waiting for state banks confirmation. They might be waiting for detailed regulations. But this is a cautious approach, and it's the right approach, because if you allow it right away, maybe the banks do not have the systems in place to oversee those transactions. Secondly, the state bank needs to keep multiple things in mind, one of which is very important, which is the FIRA manual, foreign exchange controls, because once you put your money on chain, then it's gone. Then it could go to a wallet like in US, in Canada. So money is not necessarily in Pakistan. So these sort of things will have to be figured out by the regulator before they finalize these things. But the trajectory, the destination is where everyone sitting in this room could use a credit card or your bank information and put in money in your crypto wallet, because that is the sole purpose of bringing this into play. I can understand again there would be a cautious approach, but without that happening, and if P2P persists, then this regulation has no use, because this was the sole sort of feature to replace, because peer-to-peer is something which is not sort of monitored. The government or state does not have any oversight over it. They cannot tax you. They do not know where the money is coming from. It's just in the gray or even black. But once this is done, like if you're sending money from your bank account to a wallet, it's traceable. And that I feel like would be the next.
Do you think after the license, they will enable or allow on-ramp?
They would definitely, yeah, they have to. Otherwise, there's no use for a license.
I doubt it.
So as I mentioned, two entities got NOCs. One was Binance, one was HTX. This is the important bit. What banks still cannot do? I feel like, there's a lot of reluctance of mainstream banks still getting into this, because till the time they do not have any clarity of rules, it will be very difficult for them to make a decision, because they're regulated by another regulator, which is a state bank, which has some very strict controls over them. So even with the circular, I feel like the circular was to help. It was a first step. I foresee there would be another circular coming in the next few months, which would actually allow on-off ramp, because this circular, from my understanding, does not allow that. It just allows an NOC organization to open a bank account and to open a CMA account, which is not akin to
Followed by guidelines.
guidelines.
These are not guidelines.
Yeah, so it's just a circular which sort of helps the entity open a bank account, because that was, with the 2018 circular, it could not be done. So,
My question to you is, with all your experience in this ecosystem, how far are we from a stack where we have a business model and the associated agreements in place? And how should the banks and how should entrepreneurs start working towards that?
I think so. Give it 6 to 12 months. Reason being that once the regulations also come in, it will take another 3-4 months for at least the two entities which got an NOC to have a full-fledged license. Because even within an NOC, there would be certain limitations. Once they have a full license, then they can actually enter into partnerships and collaborations with banks. Right now, obviously, they can discuss with you. But for example, like my sort of understanding is that 6 to 12 months is going to be the timeline. However, this is the right time to start working on solutions and products. If you do not work on a solution and product right now, then you'll be sort of missing out, because as we've discovered today, this technology is new. It's not very much sort of, banks are still getting to grasp with it. So it will take certain times. And I feel like, neobanks or digital banks might take an advantage over the traditional banks because of the way they function. And traditional banks might be just thinking like, oh, we'll just wait and watch, but they'll end up losing out to the neo and digital retail banks. This is something which is not just Pakistan specific. Even in UAE, even in other parts of the world, neo banks and digital banks, and fintechs, they sort of took the step, and now they're reaping the benefits. Mainstream banks were reluctant, and they're sort of losing out.
Excuse me?
Sorry.
Can you further explain the CMA account? What are their modalities? How they work? Are these the non-checking accounts, basically?
Client money accounts is that the basic essence is that you need to keep client money funds segregated from your own funds. And there's a traceability. And that account is separate, where any money that comes in from a client's wallet would be transferred into that account, and it will go out from that account. It cannot be mixed with your own funds. It is in an escrow of sorts with the bank that that client can always sort of withdraw it. It's not like in multiple accounts. It's within one account there could be thousands, millions of clients. And I think so there are bankers here who could explain the modalities a bit better.
API sort of integration with the BAST and the banks so that these pertain to.
There would be some technology sharing, obviously, but I don't know if there would be any API integration because they will have to share all their data, like from which wallet money is coming in, and that money will be deposited in this CMA account. But we still have to figure out. It's a very interesting question with regards to APIs and all. That is for something for the banks to figure out and their tech teams. So another important element was that today we also sort of discussed with the Sharia base. So Sharia has been defined in the Act, and the Supreme Court we were discussing, has given a date by 2028. Some are saying it would be extended to 2030. Some people say crypto has nothing to do with Sharia, it's not Sharia compliant. But in other jurisdictions like Malaysia, there's certain products that have been told to be Sharia compliant. So it's interesting, in the ordinance, there was a complete section on Sharia compliance. However, in the law, it has been replaced. So maybe the regulator will bring in regulations, detailed guidelines, which would address or cater to it. But Sharia will always remain a key component because in Pakistan, we are under this sort of, strict sort of timeline or watch. By 2030, any or all financial business has to be Sharia compliant. 27 December, yeah. Yeah. We have a Sharia compliance expert with us who will be on a panel. So again, wherever a regulator has powers to grant you something, at the same time, they also have the power to enforce it. Because if you do not follow, again, all these banks would know, State Bank is a wonderful regulator. However, when they have to enforce something, we hear every now and then they impose hefty fines. They do a lot of, they take a lot of measures against banks or their sort of, licensees who do not act upon the instructions or guidelines that have been given. So PWARA similarly has this authority to act against any individual or a WASP who is not in accordance with their guidelines. And these are the sort of, this is not to scare you, it's just that if you do not follow their guidelines, they will come with a whip. But the point being that without creating deterrence, in no society you can bring in people under the ambit of the white economy. So that is what I presume the intent is. Again, some questions that are still left to be unanswered, like the tax question is very important. What will be the tax? Will there be a gains tax? Will there be a withholdings tax? We still do not know about these things. We still have to wait because one of the reasons why people got into crypto was that there was no oversight, there was no tax. So as soon as they regulate it and there is a tax on it, there might be a lot of people coming out of crypto. So we still have to see. Again, in stocks, the gain tax comes from 15% to 12%. There's a ratio that goes by. Will the same be applied in crypto? Because a lot of people involved in crypto are day traders. So how would the taxation regime apply to them? So these are certain questions that are yet to be answered by the regulator. I had to rush through and I have still 4 or 5 minutes to take up some questions. Please. Sir.
You mentioned that the NOC can provide a CMA, but on the right side of the slide it says that customer deposits cannot be used.
Yeah.
So even if you have a CMA,
You cannot use
you
them.
can use it.
Without full license, you cannot use them. So this is just a necessary sort of precondition to open a bank account, because without doing that, you cannot open. So if you open it after NOC, the precondition is to open an entity in Pakistan, and then you need to deposit a capital and then apply for a license. So it's a necessary precondition to fulfill that stuff. That does not mean that you can do your operations.
The State Bank has used the term limited access for those accounts with the NOCs. We actually don't know what the limited
Guidelines would tell better, obviously. So limited access doesn't mean anything under the law or the sort of framework. So we'll have to wait for the guidelines either by PWARA or the State Bank to see what actually they mean.
Can you put some light on ART sandbox?
ART sandbox, the framework is quite straightforward, where you need to bring about an innovative idea, you need to submit a white paper of sorts, tell what sort of project you want to do. Usually there are two ways regulators operate, and we still have to see what clarity we have, because issuance under the ordinance was already a category, and it also had a minimum capital requirement, which was 1 billion PKR. So if you're going ahead with the traditional model, then you need to fulfill those requirements. But sandbox maybe is to encourage people who do not fulfill those criteria, who do not have sufficient sort of, funds, minimum capital requirements to encourage innovation. And you are incubated with an idea. The regulator then sees whether you fulfill the criteria to get a license or not. So that is the sort of thing that will be fed.
Naeem sir, we have an entire session tomorrow on products and sandbox applications.
And we'll have reps from PVARA who might be able to answer this.
Yes sir, جہاں تک مجھے سمجھ آئی ہے موسٹ آف دی جو چیزیں ہیں یہ جسٹ ایک نیا لا لانے کے لیے میں جو کہوں گا کہ ٹھیک ہے آپ کو ان سے این او سی کروا رہے ہو یہ کروا رہے ہو، لیکن یہاں پہ میں نے کوئی بھی چیز جو ہے وہ یوزر اورینٹیڈ نہیں دیکھی. جبکہ کرپٹو میں اگر دیکھیں تو تھرڈ موسٹ کرپٹو اڈاپٹیڈ کنٹری پاکستان میں آتا ہے، 40 ملین یوزرز پلس ہیں. لیکن یوزرز کا جو سب سے بڑا مسئلہ ہے وہ P2P چین اسٹرائک ہے، جن میں بینکنگ میں چلو تھوڑی بہت سپورٹ ہوتی ہے، لیکن جو دوسرے ہیں جیسے پیسہ ان میں بالکل بھی نہیں ہوتی. ایک یہ چیز، اور دوسرا فلیش USDT، اور تیسرا ہمارا مسئلہ جو یوزر کو فیس کرنے کو ملتا ہے سپورٹ کے ریلیٹڈ. اگر کوئی بندہ ایک دوسرے بندے کو چلو USDT سینڈ کرتا ہے، اس سے PKR لیتا ہے، USDT اس نے سینڈ کر دیا، وہ واپس نہیں آنے والے. اب PKR وہ بندہ سینڈ نہیں کرتا، اس کے لیے کوئی رپورٹ بندہ کسی کو کر نہیں سکتا.
اتھارٹی آ گئی. اب اس کو دیکھیں، دا ہول پرپز آف دا لا از ٹو کریٹ این اتھارٹی جو آپ کے جس طرح کے یہ مسائل ہیں وہ گریونسز سنیں، وہ ان گریونسز کو ایڈریس کریں. اس اتھارٹی کا مقصد ہی یہی ہے. پہلے تو یہ اتھارٹی تھی نہیں نا، تو آپ کی بات ٹھیک تھی کہ کدھر جائیں. ناؤ یو ہیو authority, a regulator. Obviously it will take time, it's still in its nascent stages. وقت کے ساتھ وہ بھی میچور ہوں گے، ان کو بھی چیزوں کا زیادہ ہوگا. جس طرح آپ اپنے کنسرنز ہیں، I think so on their website they've given a complaint portal as well, so you can submit your feedback, and obviously they'll also see what issues the users are sort of facing.
Individuals pay. I'm going to interject. Naeem sir, just quickly, I think generally, پہلے بھی FIA دیکھ رہی تھی اور باقی regulators have taken years to come to a place where they can issue licenses, including VARA. But we're very tight on time. I think if we can take it to tomorrow, we have an entire session on products, and we can integrate some of those questions tomorrow as well.
This was just a brief rundown of the law. Tomorrow will definitely be about product use cases and the whole NOC step. Like, ye jo question hai, it will come up tomorrow. Thank you so much.